Well, Kim Jong-un is on the move. First, he's having historical meetings with South Korea. Now, he is rumored to be in China for the first time ever for a special visit to China. There is mystery surrounding this visit, but it does appear that Kim Jong-un was in Beijing today meeting with China. Of course, this is ahead of Trump planning on meeting with Kim Jong-un. You wonder what might be being discussed behind closed doors there. So we bring in Dr. Steve Pieczenik to discuss this, as well as John Bolton. But Steve, let's first start with Kim Jong-un going to China for the first time ever to meet with Chinese diplomats. Of course, this is before he's said to meet with Trump as well in a historical meeting. What does this mean? What does Kim Jong-un going to China mean? What do you think they're discussing? And what does that mean for the upcoming meeting with Trump and Kim Jong-un, Dr. Steve Pieczenik?
Well, I don't think it's the first official visit. I think Kim has been in China before, but we don't talk about it. Kim is very close to President Xi, and what they're going to discuss are the specific trade-offs in terms of the embargo that was levied on North Korea and on China. And I think Xi understands very well that the recent embargo on steel and on other metals, aluminum, it's hurting him to a certain degree. But what he does want is he wants trade. And he wants trade with the United States very badly because he's a net exporter. And in turn, he knows he can have a very good relationship with Trump. Actually, Trump has a very good relationship with Xi. And my suspicion is he will have a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un because he understands him. I think Kim Jong-un wants to open up North Korea, and I will predict, although I won't stand behind it necessarily, I will predict that Trump will help Kim Jong-un to open up North Korea, and possibly there will be a Trump hotel there, because North Korea is tired of being isolated. And what most people don't realize is that really North Korea is the slave pool for the South Koreans. One of the reasons the South Koreans don't get very upset about North Korea is because about 20 to 25% of them work on the border, the DMZ, and further inland for South Korean companies. So there's been this détente for quite a while, and North Korea has all types of relationships all over the world. I think it'll be very fruitful, and I think Xi will act in a very important way.
So you're not of the mindset that perhaps Xi and Kim Jong-un could be, for lack of a better phrase, plotting against President Trump or plotting against the United States? You think that these are good meetings and Kim Jong-un is actually open-minded into bringing North Korea into the arms of the rest of the civilized world?
Oh, and I want to remind the listeners and everyone, I usually ask this one question to people who question me about North Korea. Have you ever been to a Swiss boarding school? And most people, of course, have not. I, by chance, have been, and I was kicked out of one. But Kim Jong-un was in a Swiss boarding school, a very good one. And what I'm getting at is that contrary to the image of this young man being crazy and isolated, he grew up in a very sophisticated environment in Switzerland. The whole family, including the grandfather, Kim Il-sung, they have a compound in Geneva. And they've lived there for quite a while. And he went to school in, I think, the German part of Switzerland. So he's quite sophisticated. He has Western products. He likes our basketball. He understands America. What he's concerned about, and this is a legitimate concern on his behalf, and I've expressed this to other parts of our own internal discussion, is that Kim Jong-un has watched Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, and he's seen what's happened when we've taken away their weapons, whether it's nuclear or whatever, and they tend to be deposed. And what he's concerned about is some kind of guarantee will he will not be deposed once he denuclearizes. And quite frankly, he doesn't have a very effective nuclear system. It's been used primarily as a bargaining chip. I think Bolton knows that. I think John understands that. And certainly Generals Kelly and Mattis understand that. We're not in any way ready to go to war, or will we go to war with North Korea? It's not feasible. There's no upside on it.
And I think that you may have just answered, at least in part, my next question, but I think you can go into a little more detail. So what does it then take? Because it sounds like this is what Kim Jong-un wants, at least at this point. What does it take for North Korea to become a part of the international commerce, to become a part of the global commerce and global travel industry? What does it take for North Korea to get there?
Basically, Kim Jong Un has to open up the borders and have a free trade exchange between the United States, South Korea, Japan, and Japan, Abe, and President Xi of China, as well as President Moon of South Korea, really have to guarantee his bona fides. And more importantly, they have to allow us to inspect their nuclear systems and plants. And once that's opened up, and I think that will happen, then trade will come in at a very fast pace. As it is now, North Korea does have trade. It's surreptitious, but it's a very effective trade. The Japanese have traded with the North Koreans. Many other countries have traded with the North Koreans, and they usually go through China or some other intermediary country. It's not a very difficult process. Once Trump sees that the opportunity is there and he can see there's an upside, and I've mentioned the upside several times to our own people, that this would be a real major success for Trump if he were to open up North Korea. And I would venture to say this would afford him the opportunity to have a Nobel Peace Prize, along with Kim Jong-un, President Xi, and whoever else would be involved, President Moon. Because it's not been done in 30, 40 years. So this is a first of its kind. That's what I'm predicting.
And of course, there's all kinds of benefits, and I think it would move North Korea and South Korea one step closer to reaching some sort of agreement, peace treaty, what have you. But I want to get into the psychological aspect of a Kim Jong-un. This is a young guy. Records actually have his age at multiple different ages. He could be anywhere, according to these records. I mean, I don't know, anywhere from 36 to 34. But he's kind of a young guy. And he's been in power for a long time, but he is kind of a young guy. Do you think that he admires a guy like Trump? Do you think he looks at a guy like Trump and says, I want to learn from this guy, I want to observe what he has to say? Or does he come at Trump as kind of a power monger and think that he's bigger? What is his psychology? Is he meek to Trump, or does he think he's bigger than Trump? Or what do you think his psychology is?
I know. His psychology, if I were to understand him, is probably akin to the psychology of Kushner. Both he and Kushner grew up in a very wealthy family. Both he and Kushner have understood what money means and what wealth has done for them. And both of them have a certain sense of entitlement, that they believe they are owed the wealth and the freedoms that they've accrued for themselves. In turn, Kim, I think, has advisors who will clearly advise him that, look, this is the time for you to break open what your father had hoped for. And actually, his father, believe it or not, was an executive producer of daily TV shows. And our intelligence operatives didn't know that until I had to hand them my book that he had written. So he's grown up in a very sophisticated environment. He's kind of a little bit spoiled. I would say he has to respect his elders, which is an Asian custom. He will be deferential to Trump. I think that Trump amuses him as he amuses Trump. And I think both of them understand that if they work together, they're going to get themselves a nice Nobel Prize and probably make a lot of money in this deal. So there's a lot of upside to a kid who's gone to Swiss boarding school, believe me. You can't underestimate what happens in a Swiss boarding school, because you get the best and the finest that money can buy you. It's not a question of merit as much as it is a question of wealth and family.
Well, it sounds to me like right now you're optimistic about Trump and Kim Jong-un reaching some sort of agreement, and North Korea not being whatever it's considered of a communist hellhole as it is today, and perhaps opening its doors to the rest of the world. We'll have more of that in John Bolton on the other side with Dr. Steve Pieczenik. But in the meantime, Steve Pieczenik was just breaking down the Trump-Kim Jong-un relations and what Kim Jong-un may have been doing in China. And I wanted to talk about John Bolton, but you know what? I just realized something that I wanted to talk to you and I had forgotten. But this is actually key to me, because they're trying to demonize Russia You got this story now. 6 countries are going to boycott the 2018 World Cup because it's in Russia. I mean, screw you. Like, you know, this is about bringing people together. It's not about your political agenda to make Russia look bad. But you have this story. The Russian spy gets poisoned in England, okay? And immediately everybody blames Russia. Trump hopped on board. It's all the Russians' fault. I'm not saying Putin hasn't perhaps done this in the past or Putin is a great guy, but I look at the circumstantial evidence. This, to me, looks like a British poisoning attack on this Russian spy. But I wanted to hear your expertise. What do you think the deal is with that Russian spy that got poisoned? Why do you think it was poisoned? And why are they blaming Russia so quickly?
You know, you asked me that last week, and I kind of took it aside. I said that's not very relevant, and I still believe it. I mean, I understand why you're asking me. The issue of a spy being poisoned one way or the other is a false issue. I mean, it has no relevance to any national security problems. It has no relevance to England per se, other than if England wants to do trading with Putin or other issues that are at hand. What issues this disguises, I'm not exactly clear, because Russia has gas and oil pipelines that are going into Europe, and at any moment they can shut it off if they want. One thing I've learned dealing with the Soviet Union and with Russia, you don't mess with Russia. If you want to mess with the Russians, you're getting into big problems. And most people really have not had the experience that I've had since the 1970s to spend time both in the Soviet Union and Russia. Putin is who he is. He has no bones about it. He's an East German intelligence officer. He grew up that way. He's proud of Russia. I can understand why he's proud of Russia. Russia really did win World War II. They lost 20 million men, and they have a pride to deal with it. What he does with his own foreign operatives, or he doesn't do, that's his business. If England wants to create some problem and our intelligence system thinks that's so important, I think they're off track. There are far more important things they have to deal with than dealing with some spies or alleged spies who were killed. That's
so it's more of just the media spin to demonize Russia.
Well, it is. It's a distortion and distraction from what really is going on. And what really is going on is that we have to finish up the wars in Syria. We have a problem. Russia is doing a lot of heavy lifting in Syria, which we were grateful for 2 years ago. And now we have to confront the Russians vis-a-vis the military. And we don't want to get involved with the Russians militarily. And we're trying to protect the Kurds while the Turks attack the Kurds. And Russia has been a very helpful superpower in the Middle East. I mean, the king of Saudi Arabia just visited Putin. Bibi has been running up to Putin and complaining to him about the Middle East. And in effect, Putin has become the schoolmaster of the Middle East on our behalf. And Iran and Russia will be a formidable force. As I said years ago, and I predicted on the Alex Jones show, there will be 3 major powers. That's Russia, Iran, and Turkey. Iran representing the Shiites and Turkey representing the Sunnis. At the same time, we've tried to put pressure, and Mattis has done this and others, on the King Salman of Saudi Arabia to tell him pull out of Yemen. You've created a lot of destruction. You've created a lot of millions of homeless people, and hundreds of thousands have been killed, and we don't talk about it. So all these protests about guns are totally distractions.
Well, and I want to get us back focused on one thing, because you brought up Russia and Syria, and then the crew showed me that story about Nikki Haley berating what's going on in Syria. I mean, Nikki Haley seems to be spinning in circles right now, but you had most of ISIS driven out of Syria, the Russians coming back in, part of that, also sweeping. Then they find 40 tons of quote-unquote chemical weapons left behind by the Syrian rebels, and somehow it's not a news story. So there's a chemical attack in Syria. Everybody blames Assad. It becomes a national news story. The rebels get cleared out. They find 40 tons of chemical weapons, and it's not a news story. Well, what the hell is that, Dr. Pieczenik?
Well, that's, again, the distraction, distortion. You have to remember the reason we got into Syria was very early on. I said to Alex, and this was before you came on board, now I'm happy that you're on board, is that Hillary and Petraeus and Panetta and the Clinton and Obama administration had made a major, major disaster in Libya. Now we're paying for that disaster. We have Al Qaeda, we have ISIS rising up in Libya. She has defanged the entire country. She has literally destroyed the Middle East as a result of her need to attack Gaddafi, who kept everything in line. And ironically, we don't even talk about France right now, that has incarcerated the president, Sarkozy, who was involved in the invasion of Libya, but in turn received $50 million from Gaddafi. So the amount of corruption, the amount of incompetency that was both in the CIA and Brennan and the Clinton administration and Kerry has been forgotten. It's as if it's gone away. So what you're getting instead is this nonsensical march on guns when our students, in fact, in Florida, are the lowest rated students. They are ignorant. They have no food, many of them. Many have no parents. Parkland is a total false flag, as was Orlando, as was Sandy Hook. And this governor is a total jerk. I mean, he's trying to run for the Senate, and he's a total disaster. He's allowing big corporations to come in and pollute our waters. And the real answer is these kids have nothing else to do. They're spoiled, they're entitled, and in terms of education, they're ignorant. And it's getting worse and worse. We are becoming a third world country as a result of, thanks to their attention to guns as opposed to education, the fact that our teachers aren't very good, the fact that we don't have money for education, and the fact that we don't care about education. While China is increasing capacity, the Chinese speak English.
Oh yeah, Chinese students get like 30 days off a year, where American students get like 3 months off a year. But I want to. We're almost out of time here. Just real quick, concise. What are your thoughts on the John Bolton appointment?
Well, I know John. John and I have always gotten along. I know John to have he avoided the draft in Vietnam. I'm not happy about that. I knew John went into Iraq. I think that was disgusting. But John can serve a purpose, and the purpose he can serve is to be the hard line as a leverage point in the negotiations against Kim Jong-un. But he's going to report to General Kelly and General Mattis, and they don't have the same kind of patience that Richard Armitage had to have John report to him when he was Deputy Secretary of State. And Richard Armitage is an incredible military hero in our world.
All right, Dr. Steve Pieczenik, expertise and insight always helpful here on The War Room. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you again.